What's up, Internet? You're tuned in episode 24 of the FlipScreen Games Podcast, a weekly video game podcast where two best buds from different nations come together to discuss the wide, wide world of video games. I'm your host, Pete and Bessie, joined, as always, by my very good friend and co-host, Mr. Steven Radford.
Hello, hello.
Welcome back, Steve. We missed you on Nintendo Noise last week.
Yeah, it was last week, yeah, which is strange to say because you only recorded it 2 days ago. But I was glad to step aside because we'd arranged to have Parker on. He couldn't make the usual time slot, and 8:30 Eastern is just too late for me to record.
A little late for you.
It was a really good show. I enjoyed listening through it when I was editing it. I do have to raise some concerns with you and Chewy on the next episode of Nintendo Noise, so hold fire for that. What was this American coup that you were all planning against me? I was not happy to hear about that.
You know, Pat, a listener, pointed out that Parker's like weird, like he's technically an American, but he's like lived in Europe. He's a global citizen, so maybe it's not as much of an American takeover as I thought. But you know,
well, that's okay then. Yeah, and I just want to address, every week you open this episode with the wide world of video games. It's just becoming a bit narrower this week, right? With the whole acquisition.
Yeah, the wide world of video games may have to get removed from the intro to the show at some point because, of course, we had the just absolute bombshell announcement this week that Xbox has acquired another major publisher in Activision Blizzard. We're going to talk all about that. We have a ton of questions from you folks for the question block. So it's going to be a great episode. I'm really, really looking forward to getting into it, especially because I know we're going to argue about some of the minutia of the deal. So this is going to be a good one. I'm ready for it to get spicy. But before that, let me remind you that this episode of the FlipScreen Games Podcast is brought to you by our Patreon producers for the month of January. They are, of course, Andy Radford, Christian Oliveria, Christopher Valenz, Gabriel Hasselmeyer, a.k.a. Asobi, Smilky Shake, Wakahula, and Zaid Ida. Thank you guys so much for your support over on patreon.com/FlipScreenGames. Y'all are the realest of the real, and we appreciate your support. Speaking of, we've also got a bunch of other goodies that you can get over on that there Patreon. If you want to go above and beyond to show your support, you can go and get access to our patron exclusive podcast, One More Thing, where we keep the mics rolling and we talk about what's going on in our lives outside the world of gaming. Steve has written here he doesn't remember what we talked about on the last episode because we recorded it a while ago, and that he hopes that I do. And unfortunately, I don't. So I would have checked beforehand if I had known this was a problem. So if you want to get a special mystery episode, go check it out.
No, seriously, we need to think about it. What did we speak about?
I do not remember. You know what? Actually, I do remember. It was one that ran the gamut. We talked about like 8 things, and they were all...
Oh, your post office, how, service with a smile and the whole, American customer service thing, you being unsuccessful. And I meant to bring it up, but the game arrived. It arrived yesterday.
Oh my God, it worked? Your package came?
Yeah, I was gonna show you on the show, but I totally forgot about it, to be honest.
Well, the other thing I talked about was my misadventures in trying to get us a P.O. box, and guess what? I'm happy to announce here on the show, I got it. Here's the key. We have a P.O. box, everybody. It is set up. So I will have by the time this posts, we'll have the address publicly released, and we'll throw
It'll be on
the
website.
Yeah, and we'll throw it in the description of this as well. So if you wanna send us a package, now you can. If you've got like a game or something you'd like us to try out, or something you want us to like.
Make sure it's not aimed for me, because it's a post box by Pete, and I now know what their postal service is like. I know, 1, how much it costs to send something to the UK, and 2, how inefficient they are at actually doing their job. And you can find out too on One More Thing this week.
Yeah, definitely check that out. But if you do have something that you want to send to Steve or Chewy, you can send it to the P.O. box. I'll just hold on to it and send a bunch of stuff at once. So, if you want to go check that out, please do. And then, of course, there are a bunch of other ways you can interact with the show that don't cost you a nickel right? Like you can write into the show just like all these fine folks did in our question block this week. You can hit us up at questions@flipscreen.games, get us on our Discord, get us on our Twitter. We throw up a thread every week to get people's comments for the show. And of course on the Discord, we've got a awesome, growing, inclusive community for you to come and hang out, talk games, have a good time, find people to play with, and chat with us. Keep the conversation rolling after the show ends. If you want to find links to all that stuff, head over to flipscreen.games, our website, and you'll find it. You'll find a link. So go check it out. All right.
Remind me to ask you on one more thing one week. Why the fuck you call your currency certain things? Like, nickel, I get, it's made out of nickel, but dime, where the fuck does that come from? And how does anyone know what a nickel is? Like, I just had to Google how much that was worth. Like, genuinely no idea.
Dude, that's like the most I'm from another country comment, though. It's like, why do you call it quid or pence or whatever the fuck? I don't know. Who cares?
Oh, yeah, I guess so. But, like, we call it 5p, 1p, 2p. We wouldn't go, oh, that's a nickel, that's a dime, that's a quarter, you know? Do you know what I mean? Like, it's...
Sure. Yeah. We do have funny little words for each one. Well, quarter makes sense because it's a quarter of a dollar, right? That makes sense.
Yeah, a quarter makes sense. The rest of them...
Couldn't tell you.
No clue whatsoever.
Couldn't tell you why that makes... I don't know why we call them pennies and not coppers. I don't know. Like, but that's a conversation for one more thing. We've got plenty of video games to talk about this week, so let's just jump into what we're playing before we get into the Microsoft Activision Blizzard of it all. And I have a very special list. I redacted it because I wanted Steve to be surprised. I played 3 indie games this weekend, 2 of which are games that Steve recommended, all of which I found on Xbox Game Pass. So it is just a perfect theme for the week here. So I'm going to unredact them here. If Steve wants to take a look. The first game is Unpacking. So I played and beat Unpacking in 2 days last weekend. I started up on like Saturday and finished it Sunday morning. I really enjoyed it.
It's a great game, right?
I thought it was so charming. Yeah. What was that?
It's a cool way to tell a story.
Yeah, I really liked its use of environmental storytelling, and it's very much like in a totally different way. It reminds me of like something like The Last of Us 2 or Undertale or something like that, where it's like this is a story that could only be told in a video game, right?
Absolutely, yeah. Which is why I think it should have been up for like best narrative and stuff at the Game Awards. I really do. I think it really took that medium to different places. There was one item when you move back into like your old childhood room, and I could not figure out where to put it. And I had to go in the cupboard. And I don't know if you had that same issue. And I was like, oh shit, why are they putting that item in the cupboard? And it just like clicked. And I was like, wow, this is such like a powerful moment, even though I'm just putting like a blob of pixels in a cupboard.
There's a similar thing in the level before that with the diploma. And I was like, wow, this is really cool. And like the way that like certain artifacts make it to different houses and then things disappear, but then they come back and things like that. It's very interesting. I really, really appreciated it. And it really, it's a unique experience, you know, and artistically, I really enjoyed its pixel art. I thought it had a great soundtrack. Like it's a great little game. And I think it's a perfect Game Pass game if you're the kind of person who, you know, likes to play some of these more experimental indies, but maybe like, you know, you don't have the budget to just like roll the dice on a bunch of them, like we kind of have the luxury of doing. Yeah, I mean, getting it on Game Pass is an absolute no-brainer. If you want like a nice little, you know, simple like weekend game, it's perfect for that, especially if you're kind of in the mood for something a little slower, like something more low energy. I've kind of been like bouncing off a lot of stuff right now because it's like I know I have Arceus coming up and I don't want to jump into anything that's like too meaty and get sucked into it. So I've really just been like enjoying kind of jumping in and out of a bunch of little indie games and, you know, going back to some favorites and stuff like that. So yeah, Unpacking was one of the first ones I went to when I decided I was like, you know what, I want to play an indie game. I want to play something short that I can finish between now and Pokemon, right? And I knocked it out so quickly because I just got into it, you know? So yeah, that was a good recommendation from you, Steve, and one that I'm happy to endorse. So yeah, check it out, Unpacking.
Awesome. Yeah, I'm glad you enjoyed it. Like I said, I had a good time with it. I actually saw Nina from Haken Chewie's other podcast, playing it on stream, and that's how I found out about it. And it looked cool. I downloaded it, and I didn't realize, like, at first glance, it's just like, oh, cool. This is like one of those monotonous games where you just, you're moving items around, putting them in the right space, and just like unpacking boxes. But it really does have deeper threads than that, and each item in that game has a distinct meaning, and you can see like some of the sentimental stuff as it goes through. It's a nice way to tell a life story, I think.
Yeah, and I think for me, like, I think it's the kind of game that gameplay wise, like, if that's all you've seen of it, I could understand why you would think that and have that wrong perception of that. It's like, oh, this is like a kind of one of those like monotonous, like indie games that are about like this weird small activity that's weirdly satisfying, right? Like, that is true. Like, it does have that element to it, and it's cool, especially if you're like playing, because like Sarah was watching me play for most of the time I was doing it, and she got really interested in the story as well, and like was having fun watching me do my kind of like interior design, and like, oh, I'm gonna put the books here and put this thing on this shelf and feature this item here, and like it's cool to like see how you do it versus other people, and like, that like
and then it tells you that you put it in the wrong place, and you're just like, fucking fine, jam it in, fucking move it around. I just want to get on the next level.
Yeah, and like having that like opportunity for like self-expression as well is really cool. Like it's a very unique game, and I don't know that it would have cracked my top 10 last year, but it was really, really special.
No, it didn't hit mine.
I thought it was a really charming game and worth checking out. A game that unfortunately fell on the opposite side of that spectrum. When I finished unpacking, I went and downloaded a bunch of other games on Game Pass that had been kind of like games I was interested in, or games that I had been recommended and told to try out. And even though I knew it was going to be bad, I downloaded Skatebird because
it's horrific.
I really just wanted to try it. Like, I wanted to just like get a sense for it, like myself, of what the rhythm was like and how it felt. And yeah, you were not wrong. Jesus Christ, that game is not good. And it's like, it's so upsetting because like it's such a vibe. Like, that game done well is a thing I think I would really like. Like, I love the
Basically, you want a bird mod for Tony Hawk's Pro Skater is what you want, rather than another game, I think.
Not really, though, because what I like yes, but like the thing is, like, it's cute that you're playing as a bird, but I also like the fact that like you're in a house and it's like, oh, how do we turn real life items into a skate park, and like it reminds me of there was a Twisted Metal game, I think that was called like Micro Warriors or Micro Machine, something kind of like that, and the entire premise of it was that it was toy cars rather than full-size death machines, and it would be like you're in a bedroom, you're in a backyard, you're in the den, and like there's like a Hot Wheel track in this room, and like things like that. And the ways that
I used to have Micro Machines V3 back on like my Windows 95 PC, and I absolutely loved it. Like the one where you would like drive across the dinner table, and then there was like a jump out into the water, and your car would like turn into like a boat, and then you'd be in the water. It was so cool.
Yeah, I'm trying to what was it called? This one I'm thinking of, Twisted Metal.
I only ever had Twisted Metal Black.
Small Brawl, I think, is the one I'm thinking of. Yeah, I think that's right. Oh, really? Twisted Metal Black is like, that was like the last like one, the last like standard.
That's the only one I ever had.
Where they kind of like, I mean, they made it like super grimdark, and it was a little bit much. I really like the PlayStation ones because they're like 90s, like fun grim. They're like edgy in the way that like a metal cover album is, where it's like, oh yeah, okay, like this is like, it's like, oh, very like amped up and crazy and wacky, but it's very like silly and self-aware in a way too, that like made it more fun and like zany than it was like scary and serious, which was like, like it's a game about the main guy is a clown who drives an ice cream truck. Like, I don't really feel like it's, like, I don't know.
I mean, that could be horror movie. I mean, it's like Pennywise, isn't it? Right?
Yeah, I guess. But then it just makes him feel like he's aping another thing rather than like it being its own thing, Like, I feel like it had such a strong identity in the earlier entries. But anyway, to take it back to Skatebird, it's just not good. Like, mechanically, it's just doesn't feel good to play. And I thought the mission structure and the way that you kind of like interacted with the world and the menus
Terrible,
and stuff.
right?
Yeah.
Did you even find them? Have they improved that have they improved that at all now? You had to find some blobs around the room or something.
You had to go find. There's like other birds that you can go find, and they have little missions for you. But I don't know. Yeah, it just has a bad game feel, and like there's no amount of like lo-fi hip hop or cuteness that can get that over for me, which sucks because it's like I love the idea, but I just don't feel like it came together. But then the last game that I played, which I'm still working on right now.
Not an indie game, by the way. There's no way you can categorize this as an indie game. It's owned by Microsoft.
Okay, first of all, that's a whole other conversation and that's another episode we can do one day. But indie has transcended the original meaning of indie, I think. I think indie is more
like
of
music.
Like indie. Like indie rock doesn't mean that you're necessarily an independent band, right? Like
I don't think I would consider this an indie game. This is a platformer that wants to be on par with Ratchet and Clank.
I mean, that's a whole other conversation. I don't think so. I don't think it's of that level, but that's fine.
It's not of that level, but I bet the next one will be, and I bet that's where they want it.
But this one isn't that, right? This one was kickstarted. It was made independently. Like Xbox's name is on it, but it wasn't developed that way. So this is an indie game. But we can have a whole debate about that on another episode. We don't have time for that today. I played Psychonauts 2 a lot. You didn't even let me say what game it was. So I
bet people guessed.
I'm I'm getting into it. I started off while it was downloading. I watched a 10-minute YouTube synopsis of the first game and the Rhombus of Ruin.
You don't even need to do that. It's built in the game. You can have the synopsis in there.
And I didn't know that, but I watched that while it was downloading, so it didn't really slow me down too much. But then I jumped into it, and I've been really having a good time with it. Like I'm still pretty early into it. I think I'm doing the hospital casino thing.
Oh, okay. So you're doing all right. I think you're on the second world.
Yeah,
now?
It's the second
teeth one, man.
mind I've
all
gone
the
into.
body stuff on it is just
so gross.
So gross.
Yeah, the teeth stuff was nasty, but yeah, the game has like a great style to it, which like no surprise, right? Everybody knows Double Fine is good with style and writing a good script and good voice acting and all that stuff. Like it's got such a good feel to it. But I'm really impressed by the way that it looks. Like it feels like
it looks like Ants the movie. That's 100% what it looks like.
It does have that look to it. But just like the level of, I guess because I've known what Psychonauts looks like for so long, and like you get glimpses of Psychonauts 2 in marketing material or whatever, but it's not until you really get your hands on a game that you get a sense of what it really looks and feels like. And I've been pretty impressed by the quality of animation and just like the depth that they've been able to bring to these character designs that originated on the Xbox. Because it's
I agree with you. I think it looks shit in the screenshots. Like I really thought this game looked terrible when I saw the marketing stuff. But you get hands on and it feels different somehow.
Yeah.
And I don't understand why. It just something about the way you move and the animations and how everything in the world interacts with one another, and those characters are also unique and different. I love that game. I think it's fantastic.
It's just dripping with personality. Like I like how every little like minor NPC that you run into like has their own vibe and voice, and like it really like
and theme tune. A lot of them have their own bloody theme songs.
Yeah, sure.
The music
is amazing. Like the jazz track in the casino level that I'm on right now. I remember I was listening to it, I was like, oh, this is really good. And there's like a really, really good, like tight little drum solo in it. And I was like, oh my God, this fucking slaps. Like these guys can play. This is crazy. And I'm really charmed by it. I'm having a good time with it. My intention is to finish it before Pokemon comes out. But yeah, I'm really liking it. If you are like me and have a taste for 3D platformers and this kind of style of game, and like you've been sleeping on it for whatever reason, I definitely recommend you take the plunge. It's a game that I figured I would like, but it's actually exceeding my expectations in terms of like
top 10. What are you talking like? would have been in there last year.
I think it probably would have. I could see myself bumping Pokemon Unite in favor of this if I had gotten around to it, because it's just got so much going on that really works for me. There's some things mechanically that I don't love. Like, I like all the powers, but I don't.
It's the moving them around, right?
Yeah, the mapping.
Yeah,
because it's like
so
I can't
weird.
remember what anything is, and it's like, oh, well,
You set those, don't you?
Yeah.
So you can set, like, I want this. I always had the fire one set to right bumper, I think it was, and then I had the trigger was like my one that where you're like rolling the telekinesis thing.
Yeah, and I have that one mapped to the same button all the time because like you always use that one. But the problem I keep running into is like, oh, I don't need pyrokinesis on this level. I need this one, and this one. But my muscle memory tells me that this is the pyrokinesis button.
Yeah,
and it's not this other button. So I'm having to like, okay, well, I actually use these more. So should I change? Like, the one that lets you jump between thoughts and like link thoughts together.
I like that one.
That one I actually used to have in a different button, and I moved it because I was like, oh, I'm having to use this one so much, like, but I need this other power.
When you got to do those fast, that's going to really screw you up. So swapping the buttons around.
It's fucking annoying, and I don't like that about it. I wish it had a better solution.
I wonder if
that.
they could solve. I wonder if they could have solved that by like doing the Bioshock thing, where it shows you what's in your hands, right? Because you change the skills in Bioshock all the time. But I know when I've got like a big thing of bumblebees in one hand, when I throw this thing, it's gonna throw a swarm. And when my hand's on fire, I'm shooting fire out of it. I think you could have had some visual cues on the screen to show exactly what you can do at any one given moment.
Yeah, or like, I don't know, like having, maybe like a Ratchet and Clank style weapon wheel, and then like you have some of the powers be more contextual, because like something I had the realization of while I've been playing now, and I don't know, this might change. I don't know if there are other ways you can use this power later on, but the jumping power, right, that I just talked about, like you only need that when there are things you can literally jump into. Why would you make me map that like a normal power versus making it like press Y? And then you're in there, and you can just jump between them or whatever, right? Like, make it more of an action rather than a power.
Like a contextual thing, and it just automatically equips the power and does it.
Because there are some powers that you can use in multiple ways, right? Like, you can use them to interact with the environment, or you can use them as an attack, or you can use them as a traversal mechanic. And, like, those things, it makes sense to have the ability to map to different buttons and switch out as I need them.
It's because there's puzzles that relate to it. So, you can burn down some posters and things, and it will show a room behind it. There's those thought bubbles that you can link to and access different places, and you have to know that they're there in order to be able to shoot it.
Okay.
Because otherwise, it would just show like a Y button, and you just click it and be like, oh, there's something over there. I just click Y and go over there.
Yeah. And, I don't know, maybe that's just something that doesn't make sense with the way that they wanted to build out the power is what I'm suggesting. But yeah, that's the thing that I'm finding the most frustrating is like just being like, oh man, like I feel like I need the Pro Controller with like the hand paddles. I feel like I need more buttons so that I can like have everything.
I think they could have solved it with just some D-pad mappings. And I actually hated the weapon wheel in Ratchet and Clank. I wanted to have a Skyrim style D-pad thing where I can put multiple on each button and just like D-pad over to which one I want, rather than I have to bring up the weapon wheel, find which one, and it's where I've put them on the slot, and I can never fucking remember, because I'm usually using the D-pad because it's got my favorite 4, and I have to open up the weapon wheel to find a different one, and all the icons kind of look the same, so I have to read what it is.
That's funny.
What I'm being shot at.
I didn't have that problem because I consistently was changing what weapons I was using because I was trying to max them all out. So it was never like, oh, these are my 4 favorite. It would just be like, okay, well, which ones am I using right now? And I would use it until it had no ammo, and then switch to the next gun, and then use it until I had no ammo. And...
Okay. No, I always had my 4 favorite, and I maxed those out, and then I just stopped buying any more weapons. I never bothered buying another one of the gloves. I just used the one that turned them into plants, and that was it throughout the whole game. Didn't bother changing.
That's so crazy.
Changing it out.
That's like the whole fun of Ratchet and Clank for me, though. It's funny. All right, so you've got a couple games on the VR side of things to discuss. What do you say we table those for next week so we jump into this Xbox conversation?
Yeah, sure.
All right, let's do it. So, like we said at the top, of course, earth-shattering news this week. Half of one of my predictions came true. Xbox has made another major
almost
acquisition.
It might not go through, right? And then you don't get the point.
That's true. And then they'll buy somebody else, and I'll probably still get the point. But this was certainly not what I had in mind when I made that prediction. I thought that the idea of them buying another major publisher like this, we talked about it. I said, of course, it's possible, but I didn't think it would be somebody of this size. I thought it would be way more likely to be like a Sega or like a Capcom, one of those other like more mid-tier kind of studios or publishers, I guess I should say. But yeah, I mean, obviously, I'm sure you've heard this by now, but if there are any of the kind of details of the story that you missed, we'll do a quick recap before we kind of get into our reactions to it. So right now, what we do know for sure is that the deal is expected to close by... You're going to have to help me out here. What does FY in this mean?
Financial year 2023,
Okay.
Which ends April 2023. So they think it's going to close between July and June of next year.
Got it. So yeah, July of this year and June of next year is essentially when we're looking at the time that this will get resolved, provided it goes through, which we'll talk about later. So it's going to be an all-cash deal of $68.7 billion, which comes out to $95 per share, which is 45% above what the shares are currently valued at, because obviously Activision in the last couple years, but months more so, has taken a couple big hits on the stock market because of all the controversy. Call of Duty sales were down comparatively, so not a great time for the company overall right now. So I'm sure they're pretty happy about that valuation there. This ended up making, the previous largest acquisition in games ever, which happened just a few weeks ago with Take-Two. This is now the largest
acquisition. Zynga, which was crazy, right? And now Microsoft just like, nah, fuck that. That was chump change.
Yeah, right. Yeah, so they I
think that was 12 billion, the Zynga deal.
Yeah, and they lost all that value in their stock and everything, and like Xbox is like the total opposite. I'm sure. So yeah, it's pretty interesting. But yeah, largest acquisition in the games industry to date. This has made it so Xbox is now 4 times as big as they were in 2018 primarily through these acquisitions. They've established very few new internal studios, so it's kind of insane to see Xbox continue. Like, you remember what the narrative was during the Xbox One generation, where it was like they have no studios, right? And now they have more studios than almost anybody.
I mean, technically, Microsoft Gaming does, which is a new division that Phil Spencer's now the CEO of.
Which is another
He got promoted.
Is another insane thing. Again, when you think about it, in the Xbox One generation, there were very serious considerations and conversations at Microsoft about spinning off and selling the Xbox brand, and now it's one of the biggest things in their portfolio.
Yeah, I mean, and you've got to think that I think they've rebranded this. Partially because of confusion, like obviously they rebranded Xbox Game Pass to PC Game Pass on the PC last year, and they've just bought King along with this deal, or if it goes through, they'll have bought King, which would be a big play into the mobile market, and I don't think they want the Xbox brand associated with that. And so to have Microsoft Gaming as like a whole that owns King and also owns Xbox and Bethesda and Activision, it kind of makes sense, I think.
Yeah, especially considering the way that they've kind of treated, like the way that they've treated Bethesda, where it's like it's under the umbrella, but it also operates autonomously, essentially, I think is probably part of that as well. It's kind of like the Google becoming Alphabet or Facebook becoming Meta, where it's like...
Yeah, I wonder if a lot of that's just regulatory reasons that they kind of want to show. They are independent. They're not really owned by us. They're operating totally independently. They've got their own CEOs. Because Bobby Kotick's staying, by the sounds of it.
Well, for now, right? We'll talk about that too. But yeah, so like we said, we have the promotion of Phil, and where it stands right now is Bobby Kotick is, and this is directly from the statement from Microsoft. Bobby Kotick will continue to serve as CEO of Activision Blizzard, and he and his team will maintain their focus on driving efforts to further strengthen the company's culture and accelerate business growth. Once the deal closes, the Activision Blizzard business will report to Phil Spencer, CEO, Microsoft Gaming. So, based on what we know now, Bobby Kotick will be in charge for at least until July of this year, probably later than that, and is going to walk away with a pretty substantial payday.
Did you hear how much his payday is contractually based on his previous contract?
I don't remember it offhand. I saw you tweet about it. What was the number?
It's $192 million.
Right. So, obviously a lot of people are upset about that. I think this is kind of, unfortunately, a parachute for him, right? Because I think if they had remained independent and things had kept going the way they were going, there's a chance that he was ousted. There's a chance that his kind of quote unquote legacy would be formally tarnished rather than just the way it has been, and I think that's a huge part of this for him. The way that he's been talking about it in the press, it's like, oh, it has nothing to do with the fact that we are marred in controversy and there's a ton of allegations against me and our stocks are at an all-time low. It was just the right time. Like, that's kind of the narrative he's trying to spin. And a lot of people are rightfully angry that, he's going to get to walk away from this not only scot-free, but, with a pretty payday as well. Which sucks. There's no other way to slice that. It's garbage, and it sucks that he will not be held accountable, seemingly in any way, unless there's a criminal case against him, which probably won't happen.
That would be the only way, I think. And to be honest, he was going to get a big payday anyway. I presume he owns a fair amount of Activision stock, and they've just got bought out of 45% above market value. So whatever the case was, he's adding to his pile of billions.
Yeah, and I mean, realistically, I think that was probably going to happen anyway, right? Even if he was ousted from the company, he would have received a big
stock.
Yeah, right. So, it sucks, but I also think characterizing this as like Microsoft is letting him get away with this because of this is also kind of like a not really quite an accurate narrative. Like, he probably was going to get away with it and get a pretty payday no matter what the resolution of the situation was,
Well, I mean, he'd negotiated his contract to pretty much guarantee that. If he ever got fired or removed from his position due to change of ownership or a bunch of other conditions, he had like a load of figures outlined in his contract depending on what condition happened. So he was going to get paid off regardless.
Yeah.
And I don't think he was going anywhere, to be perfectly honest, from what we'd seen. I mean, he managed to survive the onslaught of allegations and lawsuits and investigations throughout last year.
Yeah.
I don't think he was going anywhere. He was clinging on, and the board seemingly backed him up every step of the way.
Yeah, I think the kind of optimistic view on it is like, it sucks that he's going to get away with it and get this benefit, but I also think that this is probably the quickest and cleanest way to remove him from being in a position of authority there, and like that could potentially lead to a better future for everybody else that works at Activision Blizzard, right? The people actually making games there. Ideally, right? And we'll talk more about the pros and cons. Just to finish up kind of the news bit of it, Xbox also announced alongside this that they had officially passed 25 million Game Pass subscribers. And Steve, I remember you did some crunching numbers on that. What is the...
So at the base $10 a month, it's $3 billion a year that they're bringing in income, which is a lot of money. It's not a patch on Sony's almost 50 million PlayStation Plus subscribers, but it's still a lot of people that are subscribing to Game Pass, and that's only going to grow from here on out.
Absolutely. And I mean, particularly when you think about the fact that they now have, like, I think it's over 30 studios that are working on content for Game Pass. So you're going to have a way, way more consistent flood of games from Microsoft Studios now that they've bolstered, the number of them. And also, obviously, it's going to include some really, really high-profile games, right? Like, if you're, like, a Call of Duty player and you buy every Call of Duty that comes out every year, like, you just, this pays for it, right? Like, why wouldn't you have it?
I'm really curious as to whether World of Warcraft makes it on there like Elder Scrolls Online did on Xbox. I know Elder Scrolls Online isn't on there on PC yet, but I think they do have ambitions to bring it. Because imagine, just oh, I had a World of Warcraft subscription. Oh, I'll cancel that and I'll just become a Game Pass subscriber. It costs like an extra £3 a month or whatever,
And you get all these other games.
I can then play everything else. Sure, why not? It's a no-brainer.
Yeah, and I mean, there's a lot of potential there, right? It's also interesting to think like, what does this mean for Battle.net, right? Like Blizzard's launcher and like where all their games.
I presume it stays. They're an autonomous company.
Yeah,
still,
probably.
But I can imagine they want to integrate with the Xbox app and do all of that stuff at some point.
That's going to be the interesting question: is like, what does this mean long term? And honestly, obviously, there's really no way to know right now, right? Like we don't even know if it's going to go through yet. But we'll have to see what happens on that front. But we also it's clearly going to be a big bolster to Game Pass, no matter what subsection of the Activision Blizzard stuff, is there day and date or included. It's a lot of games, right? And like big titles that are going to come, like something like an Overwatch 2 or, the next Diablo, like that's
Crash Bandicoot, Spyro. They own that GoldenEye remake. They can release that on Xbox now.
Mm-hmm.
There's tons of stuff that Activision have. It's crazy.
Tony Hawk Pro Skater 3 and 4. Let's do it, guys.
We'll see if Vicarious Visions can come back from the dead.
If they revive Vicarious Visions, oh my god, I'd be so happy. That would be awesome. So the last kind of bit here is if this deal does close, it'll make Xbox the number 3 publisher in terms of revenue. Overall, because right now the current standings are Sony at number 1, Tencent at number 2, and Nintendo at number 3. So if this does come to pass, Xbox will get in the way of Nintendo there. So yeah, obviously a huge move for Xbox, and obviously one that has a lot of implications for the the gaming industry as a whole moving forward. So let's start. I want to begin that conversation in terms of what does this mean? What are the long-term ramifications of this? But before that, let's just talk about our kind of initial top-level reactions here, right? Like when you saw this, what did you make of the news?
I was like, holy fuck, again? Like, seriously? We just had this seemingly with Bethesda. I was like, seriously, they're just buying everyone? And I saw a bunch of people just, I don't know if it's them just trying to convince themselves or what. It's just like, oh, they're not going to make these games exclusive. And I don't see any way you spend $70 billion on a company and then you just publish the games elsewhere. Like, why would you do that? It makes no sense to me. Those were my gut reactions. It was just like, wow, they seriously want to bolster Game Pass. And they are, and clearly that's the main reason here. They published the 25 million subscribers, which I think is the first time in a year that they've announced publicly how many subscribers they've had. Huge numbers, and they want to grow that. That is that is the future of Xbox. It's Game Pass and the platform that they're building out. It's not about the boxes anymore. It's about play it wherever the fuck you want. You want to play on PC, fine, you play on PC. You want to play on your phone and stream it, do that. You want to play on a Samsung Smart TV, go ahead. We don't care. But these are all the games that we've got, and we're going to sell them to you. And now we also have Call of Duty, Diablo, World of Warcraft, Overwatch, and all of these other amazing games that you love, and you can play them as part of your $10 a month subscription.
Yep. Yeah. I mean, it's a easy value prop, right? Like Xbox, the mission now is to hit the gamer wherever the gamer is, right? And whatever kind of gamer they are. And that's getting easier and easier for them, because like, as much as we say, right, it's not about the box, like it's also directly contributing to the box being a better seller, right? Like, the Series X is the best selling Xbox, in I think ever, but if not, it's on pace with or close to it with 360, right? Which was, their best seller, up until now. So like, yes, that's true. It is a multi-tiered play for PC and mobile and cloud gaming and all these other things, but it's also making a really compelling fucking argument for if you only are going to get one box and you don't care about what Nintendo or Sony puts out, the Xbox is the way to go, right? And I think that was a way tougher argument last generation, right? Like, especially if you had a gaming PC. But now I think it's like, well, even if you do, like, if you have a gaming PC, you get Game Pass Ultimate, and
why would they care? Because they're making a loss on the boxes anyway, right? So they make a loss on the box. If they sell your box, so what? Then you've already got a PC and you're paying them $10 a month for Game Pass, so they don't care. They get you either way. You're either running on Microsoft Windows, where you've gave them money for that, and running Game Pass subscription on your PC, or you're using one of their boxes. Either way, they win.
Yeah,
they get you as a customer, and I think that's. I think it really shows just how powerful Game Pass has been. From this little, like, this is what they're trying to do to win back. It just really kind of feels like this was the vision all along, and now Phil Spencer's got the money to pay for it and to do what he wants to do.
I meant to say this earlier too. We did, yeah, and it's insane to think about, right? That like, what a far cry it is from where Xbox was just a couple years ago to now having this ability to be like, we have spent upwards of, like, we're approaching $100 billion of spending on acquiring game studios, right? Like, we're probably a couple off, but I mean, like, one more big acquisition and that we go over that number, right? Like, that's nuts. That's a nuts amount of investment into the space, and it speaks to their belief in the future of games as, a medium that's only going to grow. But I also think it shows like just how much games have grown in the last couple of years, and that like there are just more and more people playing year over year. Like it's a hobby that is really on the rise, and Microsoft, I think, is positioning themselves to be in an incredibly strong position, because all of the other, and Phil Spencer said this in one of the interviews he did this week, where he was talking about his concern about other tech companies entering gaming who don't really understand gaming. Whereas he's like, I respect Nintendo. I respect PlayStation. They care about video games. That's their business. That's our business. That's how we look at games. It's not one of the things we're doing. It's the thing we're doing, right? Like, that's what Microsoft gaming is about, right? And he kind of threw some shade at like Google and Facebook and Amazon for being like, he's like, he said he basically respects the other two and doesn't really respect them. And I mean, Microsoft has the same level of resources and money that those companies have, but actually gets gaming and has cachet because they've entrenched themselves the last 30 years, with Xbox. So
yeah, I mean, what I really don't understand about Amazon is they own Twitch, for fuck's sake. Like, seriously, do they just not talk to that team and just be like, can you help us understand video games and like what people want and what people are even playing on your fucking platform? And you own the platform, you know what the most streamed games and most watched games are. Just fucking make one like that.
What if we make an MMO and there hasn't been a successful one since World of Warcraft? But hey,
it's just crazy. I mean, I was looking at the top games from PlayStation from last year, and they now own the number 2, which is Call of Duty Vanguard. They're like either one acquisition or license away from having the top 2. With number 1 in Europe is FIFA, and I think it always will be. EA have openly spoken that they don't want to renew that license. I mean, what if Microsoft are just like, yeah, we'll take the FIFA license, why not? And they build out a kick-ass football game, and you've got a football game and the top selling sports game and the top selling shooter on Game Pass, and possibly exclusive to your platform.
Aside from that too, right? Like, they also have the top racing game in Forza, and also the like keeping on the sports thing, right? Because we don't really talk about sports games because we don't really play them and don't care about them, but they're a huge market. I'm pretty sure Madden and FIFA are the only ones that aren't on Game Pass at this point. NBA 2K is already there, and MLB The Show's there. So if they were to pull that, yeah, I mean, you'd have all those games that we talk about, the casual gamer, right, who buys Assassin's Creed and Call of Duty and a couple sports games or whatever, and like that's all they play. Like,
yeah, and that's a huge market for both of the console sellers, and they wouldn't need to sell them any games.
No, they could just be like, okay, buy an Xbox Series S and a Game Pass subscription, and you're good to go, buddy. Have fun.
Or here's all access, and you can get it all for $30 a month.
Yeah, it's crazy. It's an insanely good value proposition. And it's scary. It's scary how good their positioning is right now. But we'll see. We'll see what it means. So I want to jump into some of the questions we got before we talk about some of the other angles of this, because I definitely don't want to give the impression that we're just going to talk about that this is exciting and it's hype, because sure, maybe, but there's also a lot of implications that go along with this that I want to talk about. So this first question comes from one of our Patreon producers, Andy Radford, who wrote in and said, where does this leave small independent studios in a landscape which is increasingly dominated by Microsoft, Nintendo, and Sony? And I think... Go ahead. Yeah.
I was going to say, I think they're in the same place they were. And I actually think they're in a better position than they have ever been, because you've got both Microsoft and Sony and actually Nintendo all looking for those indie titles and seeing which ones are like great and backing them and giving them money. You think we've spoken about it on Nintendo Noise, right? And it's one of Chewy's predictions for this year is they'll do another small indie game like a Stretchers or a Good Job or something like that. We've got the Idea Xbox stuff, which is always funded indie stuff. Sony's making a play with their indie stuff. Obviously, Nintendo's had indies all along from the beginning of the Switch. That was like a big thing for them. And I think Game Pass has been incredible for indies. It's where you've just spoken about three indie games that you played this week that you possibly wouldn't have even picked up if it wasn't for Game Pass.
There's a good chance I would have never played Unpacking. Ever.
Yeah. You'd have never played it. You wouldn't have known how great a game it was, and that developer wouldn't have had any revenue from you. And they get that opportunity because of stuff like Game Pass. I think it's an incredible time to be an indie developer. It's a very brutal landscape out there, and I think if you don't necessarily have the best support or publisher or representation, it can be difficult. But you've got Devolver Digital. They went public late last year. They are an exclusively an indie publisher. It's really interesting to see the kind of scope of games. It seems to me where we've had the biggest losses are those mid-level studios. They're getting snapped up and they're disappearing, and they're being pumped up to be AAA studios instead. And you can see that. I think Obsidian is like a great example. It was just an independent mid-level studio, and now it's owned by Microsoft. And I think we can see a lot more of those acquisitions happening on Sony's side. They're cheaper than the big publishers, and they can snap up these mid-level developers or mid-level publishers and add them to their ranks.
Yeah, and I think we're in an interesting spot, because I generally would say I agree with you. I think right now, they're not in an inherently dangerous place, because I think I think the beauty of the strength of the indie market is that there are a lot of independent studios that are able to have small teams and operate leanly and etch out a nice niche for themselves, right? Like folks like, your yacht clubs and, or even like, something like Unpacking was like a game that was made by two people, right? And then it got picked up by, oh, you're muted.
So was Death's Door, right? It was one of the biggest games of last year. It's just come to Game Pass now, but it didn't even need to come to Game Pass. It had the backing of Devolver. Inscription was the same. It's by a solo developer. I guess Undertale is a great example, and now he's able to publish the next game himself.
Right.
Chucklefish is no longer publishing Stardew Valley because he's able to publish it himself.
Right, and that's the thing is, I think overall, it's not a bad space right now, because like if you are a young, hungry development team with a good idea and a great game, there are more options for you than there have ever been for you to find a publishing partner who won't try to steal your IP from you, which is huge. And I think that is something that it used to be a trade, right? Like you look at somebody like Don't Nod, right? And like Life is Strange, their biggest IP, they don't own it, right? And like they had to make that trade to keep the studio afloat. And now I think there are a lot more opportunities for studios in that kind of a position to partner with a Devolver or an Xbox or someone and be able to, find avenues to get their small game on a bigger stage without necessarily having to compromise or sell it or sell themselves, right? That said, I'm very concerned by this tenor, right? That we're seeing this really big race now, I think, to consolidate the video game industry, because we've seen what that's done for Hollywood, right? And other industries. And it's I don't want to get to the point where we have a duopoly in gaming, or like a triopoly or something like that. And it's like the only people who can afford to make big budget games are Xbox and PlayStation and Nintendo, or maybe Epic and, you know, whoever else. Because that sucks, right? Like the cool thing about where the gaming industry has been, I think, over the last several years, is seeing more and more and more publishers enter the sphere, and there being, you know, pretty much limitless number of ways that you can get your game out there, and you know, and that there are all these different decision makers available to be like, oh, well, you know, Xbox, PlayStation, and Nintendo said no, Devolver said yes, right? And like, if we get to a point where those studios are just not, you know, I don't know, like, if we get to a point where there's not space for those studios, that's a thing that will be bad for the health of the industry. And I don't think that there's reason to think right now that we're in jeopardy of that, but it's possible, right? And it's something that we've seen happen in other industries, and folks who are really, really passionate about movies, right? Like, I've had plenty of conversations with people, and critics talk about this all the time, about how, you know, the movie market is saturated by blockbusters that are made by like 2 companies, 3 companies now, between Universal, Sony, and Disney, right? And that is not a good thing for the ability for there to be a broader, you know, landscape of content for us as players, right? Like the extremely wide array of games that we see nowadays is because it's very easy for anybody to publish their game, right? Like you anybody can make a game and put it out now. And that will
But it does always rely on other services or other companies in order to do that, right? Because you've got your engine from Unity or Epic Games. Epic Games is part owned by Tencent, so there's one of the big players straight away getting some money off of you. Then you've got to go to someone like Valve in order to distribute the game for you. But there's always bigger companies involved. And if you want to be on one of these platforms, you've got to negotiate with them. I mean, there was stuff like Itch where you post it up and people download it and can play it there and then, but I don't think that's how the majority of people find their games and get their games.
No, and it's not, that's not like a viable path to you creating a business, really. You know, it's like, it can be, but not usually. So, I mean, that's the thing, right? Is like, there's already kind of that reliance on bigger players, so I don't, you know, I don't know. It's not inherently a problem today, but if we see Microsoft make an acquisition like this every other year or every year, like they are right now, how long?
They won't be able to. I think this is the last huge one they're able to get away with. I don't think they're able to buy Nintendo, who's going to be below them now.
No.
And they're not going to be able to buy Sony, who's above them. And I don't think they are interested in having like EA or Ubisoft or Sega. Of all of them, I kind of thought Ubisoft would have been the one that they would have gone for.
My thing is, though, you say that, but we wouldn't have said that about Bethesda, and we wouldn't have said that about Activision Blizzard, right? Like, I would have thought that Activision Blizzard was untouchable because they're on a bigger.
I thought it was, and I also kind of thought I kind of still see that they are. They're toxic at the moment, right? Most people wouldn't touch them with a 10-foot barge pole, and yet somehow. Because it was very interesting. I don't know if you saw the Kara Swisher interview in the New York Times. I think it was around early January, December. And Phil Spencer made such a shift from what he was saying about Activision. And it was just like, oh, we're reassessing our relationship or whatever. And he really softened his initial language. And obviously it was because this deal was in the works. And it's interesting that that's seemingly been those concerns have seemingly been brushed aside in order to get this through. Or maybe Phil sees that them as a company can fix it and fix that culture and once Bobby's gone. And
I think that's his belief, you know, and like I've seen a lot of cynicism about that. I understand that cynicism. I don't think it's like unwarranted. I don't believe in having corporate heroes, right? Like business people are business people, right? But generally speaking, I like Phil Spencer, right? Like from what I know about the man, from when I've heard him talk, the decisions that he's made since he's been in charge, I feel like he gets it. I think he gets games. He cares about games. He actually plays games. And I think, he's trying to make Xbox as strong and competitive and as big as they can get, right? Like, and that's his job, right? And I think he's doing a good job at it, right? I think that he is aware of the baggage that's associated with this brand, and that it is something that could easily tarnish his good reputation and Xbox's good reputation and some of their gamer goodwill if they don't clean house. And I have to imagine that even aside from the idea of moral imperative or any of that kind of shit, right? The way that we've seen, them manage studios seems to be like, we want to acquire and then give you resources and create the best working environments possible. From what we understand about the bad situations at Activision Blizzard that aren't related to just regular talks, like all the reports of the very toxic behavior from management and the things that are like not relevant to business decisions, that are just people being bad people and having people defend them and let them get away with it. One of the big things that's really seemingly been affecting Blizzard the last couple of years has been Activision's desire to have them put out games faster, to, be churning out releases on a more annualized basis and things like that. That probably won't be a concern with Xbox, right? Like there's less need to do that because they have so many studios, and that's not really the model that they're built around, is not releasing as many games as quickly as possible or something like that, and having annualized franchises.
They want one a quarter, I think is what Phil said before. They're aiming for one big game per quarter on Game Pass, and if they can hit that with like all of their 40 studios or something crazy at this point, then they're golden. But it's not just Blizzard that was the issue, right? It was Activision as a whole. They'd set this system up where everyone was working on a Call of Duty game, and it was just like, we've got to make money from these Call of Duty games because we pump one out every single year, and that's our business model, is we're making new Call of Duty. And we've got Infinity Ward, and then we had Sledgehammer do it, and then we had Treyarch do it, and now fucking Toys for Bob was assisting with it, and it's just like crazy,
right? And it's like, now they don't have to do that, right? Like they don't have to put out a Call of Duty every year. Like they have other shooters in their portfolio that they can lean on, and they can lean more into Warzone.
Yeah, what if you have like a Call of Duty one year, you get Halo the next year? You can like alternate and like get some of these big games and give space and give room to breathe, right?
Yep.
Microsoft doesn't have to worry about like, do we release Halo now because Activision's going to release a Call of Duty, and it's going to get, is it going to compete? Is it going to cannibalize the sales of our game or versus their game? Whereas they don't even need to worry about that anymore. Well,
yeah,
soon.
And I mean, like, it could also lead to like some of those studios that have been limited to making, like, we had there's the quote from him about Toys for Bob, like not having to work on Call of Duty anymore, like, and they'll be able to work on other things, and like that's exciting, right? Because that's not what that studio was built for, right? They have this proven track record of making another kind of game that people like and love and sold well and fits well in the Xbox portfolio, and great, like let's let them do that. That's what they're passionate about.
Yeah.
Like, I think that I think there will be a lot of positives to come out of this. But one of the things that I've also seen a lot of conversation about is something that relates to a question here that we got from one of our patrons, Tyler Olson, who wrote in and said, one thing I'm not seeing mentioned enough regarding the Microsoft Activision Blizzard acquisition is that it essentially kills any opportunity for the ABK Workers Alliance to unionize. What do you think this does for unionization in gaming as a whole? So I wanted to pull a quote here from Phil that was in an interview with the Washington Post. This was from Gene Park. And he said, I'm going to be honest, I don't have a lot of personal experience with unions. I've been at Microsoft for 33 years, so I'm not going to try to come across as an expert on this. But I'll say we'll be having conversations about what empowers them to do their best work, which, as you can imagine, in a creative industry is the most important thing for us. So I think you're probably right, Tyler. I think the likelihood of the ABK Workers Alliance like actually being able to unionize and get recognition is probably this probably doesn't help that cause. I think there's probably a decent likelihood that this will end that initiative. That said, I do believe what Phil Spencer is saying here in terms of his desire to create a better culture at those studios that empowers them to do their best work. I believe that he means that. I also don't think that means that he's going to be like, great, rah, let's let all of our developers unionize, right? Because that would have major implications.
One studio, yeah.
Would have major implications across the rest of Xbox, right? Or Microsoft Gaming, I guess. Because if that happened, it would legitimize any other studio that wanted to do that. And I am obviously in favor of that, but I imagine as a business person, Phil Spencer's probably not, unless he feels like it's something that will be advantageous to his business goals, right? To be like, well, if this makes the workers happy and we can bargain with them and blah, blah. But I don't know that that's going to be in his conscience because he runs a multi-billion-dollar company, and those two things do not generally align. So I think you're probably right. I think that this is a big problem. And what do I think it means for unionization as a whole? I mean, it's tough to say because we don't know what was going to come of the ABK Alliance, right? Like if the ABK Workers Alliance had been recognized and had landed, it would have been a major step for the gaming industry and for unions in the industry as a whole, which, I've been a vocal supporter of for years. That said, we know how toxic the management was there. They were actively threatening these folks for what they were doing. They were trying to actively threaten people to not join. So I don't know that they were ever going to get recognized anyway, because the leadership at Activision Blizzard, I think, is pretty much rotten to the fucking root, So I think this is a major blow to the idea of us actually getting a game developers union or pockets of them. But I guess the optimistic view is that Microsoft will improve the culture enough that there's less need for a union. But I think that every worker should have a union because that's the only way that workers have the ability to bargain with the people that control their future. So it's a shame.
I agree with you. I mean, I don't necessarily know that it kills it. I think that it can still work towards it. Whether it becomes a formal union, I still think the ABK Alliance will still be around. But there was a point that I wanted to pick up on that Stephen Totillo over at Axios Gaming found on Twitter in the Activision SEC filing related to this. Activision told the SEC there is no strike to the knowledge of the company. No material allegations of sexual harassment have been found since 2018, and no legal proceedings that would have material adverse effects to the deal going through. So there you go. There is no strike going on at Activision Blizzard.
Which, that's a hell of a way to spin it.
Obviously, it's not true. Obviously not true.
Right. Hell of a way to spin it. Lot of spinning in this announcement, right? Like the way that they talk about Bobby in the original statement and everything. It's like, there's a lot of grossness there. So I'm not surprised that that's how that's being handled. So then I guess kind of the last thing to touch on is the the chances of this not actually going through. We've kind of danced around that throughout this conversation where obviously there's a lot of people crying monopoly, that this is something that, should step in and that we need trust busting in the gaming industry. I don't think that's going to happen. We've already seen some lawmakers talking about it. We have a tweet here from a Representative Nadler on Twitter who said, Activision Blizzard, already a gaming giant, has a pattern of bullying workers to evade accountability for rampant sexual misconduct. I expect this deal to be closely scrutinized to ensure that it won't harm American workers or competition. I don't think that will materialize to anything. I said it earlier, right? Like Disney bought Fox. There's no argument to be made that this is, at least in my opinion, right? I'm happy to hear from folks who disagree. I don't think there's an argument to be made that this is monopolization in any kind of way, right? Like,
no, but there is antitrust without it needing to be a monopoly. It's showing that it limits choice regardless for consumers, regardless
Right.
of it being a monopoly or not. And one way it would limit the choice is if Microsoft didn't put the games on other platforms and it forced them in order to use their products. The whole thing with Sony today and him talking to them and I mean I'll read his tweet. He
Please.
said that he had good calls with leaders at Sony and confirmed our intent to honor all existing agreements upon acquisitions of Activision Blizzard and our desire to keep Call of Duty on PlayStation. Sony is an important part of our industry and we value our relationship. And I think that's been very carefully worded, probably by a PR person to like get the our desire thing. I think that's the telling words there is they want to keep Call of Duty on there. That's their desire, but whether they can make that deal with Sony for it to happen is another matter. And I think that's probably where it's gonna come down to is can they prove that this doesn't harm the consumer, and that's what they need to do. And I don't think it does personally, but it's not just your government that they have to get it passed. Our government in the EU, a lot more stringent.
Sure.
Our government made Facebook sell off Giphy after they bought them because they thought that it was harming the competition because Facebook were hoarding all the GIFs for themselves, which seems preposterous to me. But, you know, this is a larger deal than that. So it could well get shot down in another country or by another regulator.
It could, but I don't feel that there's an argument to be made there, honestly, because it's just like, yeah, like it literally, if they do that, it will limit consumer choice to some degree. But like to argue that it's like so much so, I don't think there's an argument to be made there when it's like Facebook was able to acquire Instagram, which was one of their biggest competitors. Disney was able to acquire one of their biggest competitors in a smaller market. There were only 4 major movie studios, and they bought one of them. Like if it was Nintendo, if it was PlayStation, I think that would be a different conversation. But like, you know, I don't know.
I also wonder how many of these like representatives or is representative congressperson? Or is that the other one?
Yeah.
So I wonder how many Congress people actually know the difference between like I bet they know in Nintendo and a PlayStation and an Xbox.
Yeah.
Do they really know what like the difference between a publisher and a developer and how the industry works as a whole and what Activision means and where it fits in the like Jenga tower of game studios? I bet they don't. And I'm sure Microsoft hired and Activision, I know they did. They hired very good lawyers according to the Microsoft press release, not the Xbox one. Goldman Sachs are helping out with this deal. So, you know, that's going to be going very well. And they have to pay Activision $20 billion if it doesn't go through.
I thought it was $3.
It was a lot of money either way. You might be right. It's a lot of money. I think
it's a multiple $billion payout.
They ain't risking that. Who's risking that? I mean, that's what $3 billion is like half of the Bethesda deal, just for this not to go through.
No, it wasn't $6 billion.
How much was the Bethesda deal?
I'll look. That seems really.
It wasn't very much. It was not very much in comparison to this. Bethesda looks like a bargain compared to this and Zynga.
Yeah, that's true. $7.5 billion. Okay, yeah.
Yeah, so it's just under half of that deal that they have to pay Activision if this doesn't go through. They're not going to want to do that. They'll try their hardest to make sure that this goes through, and I don't think they would. They will have assessed the risk before even announcing this deal.
Absolutely. Yeah, they're. I think they're handling this with all that in mind for sure. So on the competition and like the Sony angle of it all, there was another thing that I know you wanted to talk about. It's a conversation we've had in the past, and it got kind of reignited this week when Jeff Grubb from VentureBeat wrote an article called "Sony Should Welcome Xbox Game Pass onto PlayStation 5." So this is something that you agree with and think could happen. I
mean, I said it last time this happened with a major publisher when they bought Bethesda. My view was, maybe these games aren't exclusive to Xbox. Like Elder Scrolls isn't exclusive to Xbox, but the only way you get it on PlayStation is if they allow Game Pass to be there. Like, you can have Elder Scrolls on your platform, but it's either via Game Pass or you spend $70 to buy the game. But we want Game Pass on there. I think it's a part of the reason they want these big hitting IPs. One, yes, it bolsters Game Pass's library, but two, it's great leverage with Sony.
Sure.
Like phenomenal leverage.
I said it the last time we talked about it, and I'll say it again. I think it's like a truly wild thing to think that that's a good idea for Sony. Like, it would be a great move for consumers, but I don't see how it benefits Sony even at all. Because then you're like, yes, you'd get these games that would have been limited from your platform onto your platform, but you're also tying your future to one of your, if not your biggest competitor, right? Who is getting bigger and bigger all the time. I think that if Sony does that,
it depends what Sony sees their competitor as, right? Is Sony seeing their competition as people that sell boxes, or are they seeing their competition as games publishers? If they're seeing their competition as game publishers, every game publisher is a threat and their competition. And
I don't think they look at it that way.
Jeff makes a great point in his article that EA has EA Play on PlayStation. You can subscribe to Netflix on your iPhone next to your Apple TV, next to Apple TV Plus. Like, there are competitors on the other platforms, right? So you've got EA Play on there. They've already let one subscription service through, which potentially cannibalizes sales of EA games on the PlayStation platform.
Yes.
Why wouldn't they let the platform with Call of Duty on it?
Because it's not the same. Like, because EA is not a true competitor to Sony, right? Like, and I think it's the same argument where it's like, I don't think Sony looks at themselves as being in necessarily the games publishing business, even though of course they are. I think
they're the number one.
Right, but they make premium AAA game experiences to sell their hardware. Like, that is their business model, right? And, you know, no matter what way you slice it, Xbox is one of the two companies that competes with them for that, right? Like, we talk all day about how Xbox is starting to be in a point where they maybe don't look at PlayStation as their direct competitor. PlayStation has to still look at them as their direct competitor because they are. And if you're a normal person who just buys one console and isn't like, you know, I'm going to own every console so I can play every fucking game, which is the average person, and you're only going to buy one, or you're going to buy one and a Switch, Xbox wants you to buy an Xbox, and PlayStation wants you to buy a PlayStation.
I don't think Xbox cares if Xbox Game Pass is on PlayStation, and I don't think PlayStation should care because you're buying their console anyway, and then you're buying their exclusive games on their platform.
Yeah, but
and you're also just playing the Xbox.
But that's
ones,
not.
And then
that's
you don't
not,
buy an Xbox.
That's not how it works, though, because like and we talk about this all the time. The business model for a console is you sell hardware, generally speaking, right? You sell hardware at a loss, and you make your money back on software. And it's not that they would just lose. Oh yeah, you can play these Xbox games now. Any game that comes there, then you don't buy it on PlayStation. You play it for free, and rather than
you're getting your 30% of the subscriptions every month instead, and that's arguably a more valuable proposition to them because most people buy FIFA and Call of Duty every year, and you're spending $120 a year for an Xbox Game Pass subscription instead. Sony takes 30% of that. They've already made more money than one game.
But they don't, though, unless there's enough people that have Game Pass on PlayStation. Right? Like, you have to hit a point where there are so many people that the consistent revenue you earn from allowing Game Pass on the system is more lucrative than game sales, which is insane. That's their whole model. Like, I don't think it makes any sense. I really don't. And I think, like,
I don't understand why, considering they're about to launch their own version of this same service.
Because they own that. That's how do you not see how that's different? Because
you're still going to have to subscribe to PlayStation Plus in order to play online. So if you're getting Call of Duty, you've got to pay for PS Plus,
right?
Which is going to be their model moving forward, seemingly. They're aping Microsoft's platform and Game Pass by bundling PlayStation Now with PlayStation Plus. You've already got to pay for that subscription, so they've got your revenue, 100% of it there.
That's true.
And then they get 30% off of Game Pass as well. So they're win-win there.
I mean, I don't know, maybe. Like,
the alternative is you don't have Call of Duty on your platform. You don't have Elder Scrolls on your platform.
That's not the alternative, though. That's not the alternative. Why? Because Phil Spencer just said they want to keep Call of Duty on the platform.
He said our desire is, but I think that's worded in a way where it's like, yeah, we'd like to keep it there, but Sony's not playing ball because they're not letting us put Game Pass on it.
I agree that it's non-committal, but I think that the idea that it definitely won't be there is crazy, because like Minecraft
I
is
think
the prime
Warzone
example.
stays. Yeah, but I think Call of Duty Warzone stays. Everything they've got a contractual agreement with stays. And then anything new going forwards is exclusive, just the same as it was with Bethesda.
It can't be, because like of Warzone. You know, like if you're gonna,
Yeah, but Warzone stays because it's free to play. It's a
but every time a new
multi-platform-
Call of Duty
it's a
comes out,
multi-platform game.
but every time a new Call of Duty comes out, it ties to Warzone.
Does it? Like,
Yeah.
I thought they were all different multiplayer.
No. So what
games.
happens
Like
is
Vanguard is like Vanguard is separate
Yes.
from Warzone.
But you earn things in the main game that transfer over to your Warzone account.
I mean, great. So then Xbox players will have an advantage.
I mean, I guess I don't see that, right? Like I don't know. Like I it could happen that way, but I also think that like the amount of microtransactions they make on Call of Duty, like,
You really think that's gonna add up to $70 billion? I don't see it. Like, I don't think they give a shit about the revenue. I really don't.
I don't know.
This is about the play for Game Pass, and that's what it's always been with these acquisitions.
But that I don't think that argument holds water, because like you buying the game full price on PlayStation doesn't hurt Game Pass, right? Because if you're a person who is gonna get Game Pass, you'll just play Call of Duty for free on Game Pass on Xbox or PC or wherever else you're going to play it. And if you're a PlayStation player who doesn't interact with the Xbox ecosystem, Microsoft still gets your money. You know, like you can make the same argument.
I can see it both ways, but it is I think a net positive for both of them to just have Game Pass on PlayStation at this point.
I really don't. And I think optically it's a really bad look for PlayStation. I think PlayStation would look at that as eating shit. Like I think you're going to be damned before PlayStation is willing to sell Xbox on PlayStation. I really do.
I mean, we've already got a PlayStation Studios game on Xbox. We've got an Xbox Studios game on multiple Xbox Studio games on PlayStation.
I don't think that's the same
all
thing.
All of the Minecraft games.
You don't see the Xbox logo.
You do. You boot up Minecraft Dungeons. You'll see Xbox Game Studios logo.
On
you
PlayStation.
boot up.
All right.
Yeah, and
Okay.
you boot up MLB the Play on Xbox, and you see the PlayStation Studios logo.
That one I know, but Xbox doesn't care. I think PlayStation does. And maybe, Minecraft is so big that they don't care about that one. But I don't know. I think there's a big difference between being like, yeah, you can put your games on our platform if you want and pay like the way that any other publisher does, versus being like, yes, let's take the backbone of your business and make that part of our ecosystem. I think that's a huge win for Xbox and a huge loss for PlayStation. And then it would irrevocably tie their future to their primary competitor. Unless
isn't their future going to be tied to their primary competitor anyway if they rely on like the Call of Duty revenue and getting Call of Duty on their platform to sell consoles, because we know that that's the number 2 best-selling game of every year.
I mean, right, like that operates under the assumption that every games publisher is a competitor with PlayStation, and they're not, because they sell their games on their platform, right? So
no, but what I'm getting at is if they don't work with Microsoft and don't let Microsoft sell their games on their platform, you don't get Call of Duty, and people get pissed off that you don't have Call of Duty, so they don't buy your console in the first place. I mean, and then they fuck off to your main competitor.
That is a possibility too. But I also think that like the idea that like makes or breaks PlayStation 1 title is like Call of Duty wasn't a bestseller on PlayStation during the PlayStation 3 era. They had other things that were attractors. I mean, it was, but it wasn't. Xbox was the dominant place to play shooters that generation, is my point, right? Like the ecosystem on PlayStation was smaller. So I don't know. Like, I guess it remains to be seen, right? Like, I think the point that you made about you being required to have PS Plus to do,
which is how EA Play works in order to play online.
That is a very compelling argument, and that's something I hadn't considered, because you would be locked into their subscription service even to have access to Xbox. So maybe that makes enough sense, especially if they raise the cost of that when it becomes Spartacus. Who's to say? But I just have such a hard time thinking that's something that makes sense for Sony, or even if it made sense, that it's a decision that they would make, unless it was like obviously bad business to not do it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, there's going to be a lot of number crunching, right? And I'm sure Sony were very anxious yesterday, which is why they got on the phone with Phil Spencer today, as of time of recording, to find out what the hell's going on and whether Xbox are going to do the honorable thing and hold up their contractual agreements and blah 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 blah. And I don't know. It's tough because it very much is a case by case basis on all the past examples, right?
Yeah.
Elder Scrolls Online stayed because it was a big game and it was already over there, but and Minecraft was already there, so that stayed. But then we know Elder Scrolls 6 and the like new stuff and Starfield is all going to be exclusive. So it very much is case by case, and maybe Microsoft look at Call of Duty and go, you know what, you're right. You can make shitloads of money from all these microtransactions, so let's just do it. But
yeah, whereas
I have a hard time believing that. And I have a hard time believing that Microsoft want to sell games that are riddled with microtransactions in the first place.
See, I don't think so though, because they're in a point where like they have games that do that. Minecraft has microtransactions, and I think
you're right. And Forza does. It has the VIP stuff and the car packs and all that stuff. Yeah,
I think
so you're all right.
Games that are oriented around multiplayer and microtransactions and that need large communities to be enjoyable and successful are games that they will keep on PlayStation. And I think anything that doesn't fit under that category is an Xbox exclusive. Single player games, exclusive, right? But your Minecrafts, your Call of Duties, all those kinds of games, it just makes sense to have them be cross-platform and let everybody play because it's easy. It doesn't hurt you to do that because it's still a better deal for somebody to go play it on your proprietary system, and you get money no matter what, and you get positive press. Look at good guy Xbox putting it on PlayStation. Oh my God, we love Xbox. We love Phil Spencer. Ooh woo. Like cachet and street cred has been a huge part of Xbox's game plan. I wouldn't be surprised if they did it because, to your point, well, they don't care about the revenue, then why do they care about the loss?
Mm-hmm.
Quote unquote, right? It's not a loss. It's just maybe less money than if you had done the more aggressive thing, but holy shit, do you even need to do that, right? Like,
not really, because you've got like seemingly like an infinite pit of money,
infinite
in
war
your
chest.
account.
Yeah.
You can just buy everything you want.
Right, exactly. So, I think overall, they're in a great position, and for all of the concerns that come along with this, with media consolidation and all that stuff in general, it's only going to keep happening. So, if it's something that I think is going to actively benefit, the development studios at Activision Blizzard and provides value to us as the consumer, that's the bright side to look on here, right? Is that I believe the silver lining to the inherently negative things that come along with this is that I absolutely believe Xbox will at least try to improve the culture at these studios. Hopefully that will work. And I also think that they will be unquestionably better stewards of the IP that they've acquired. They will treat that IP better than Activision Blizzard does by a lot.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, and you just hearing like Phil Spencer in the interview with Gene Park, where he's talking about like looking at their old IP, King's Quest, Guitar Hero, Hexen, and like possibly getting excited about bringing some of that old stuff back, let alone like Crash Bandicoot and Spyro now being possibly Xbox exclusive, where they were formerly PlayStation staples.
Mascots?
It's insane.
And he said Toys for Bob's, one of the studios working under the Activision Blizzard banner, successfully launched games like Crash Bandicoot for It's About Time, but later got folded into supporting Call of Duty games. Spencer said the Xbox team will talk with developers about working on a variety of franchises from the Activision Blizzard vaults. So that's from Gene Park's article. So it's like, yeah, it's really interesting, right? Like that could be a really cool thing, right? Like rather than seeing those IP get put on ice so they can make 5 Call of Duty games at a time, they might have a chance, right? So,
Well, and you just get one of your other studios to help out with Call of Duty. It's like, oh, you need someone to help with Gunplay 343. Just, go show them how it's done.
Could be. Yeah, and I mean there's a lot of potential for good to come from this, along with all of the, the stuff that is not so good. I don't think it's an inherently good or bad thing, really.
Yeah. But before we close out, though, I do want to talk about Satya Nadella, the CEO of Microsoft's quote on this, which I think is just fucking bullshit, about how they're going to play a key role in the development of metaverse platforms. And I'm just like, I'm sorry, this has nothing to do with the metaverse. You've just heard that buzzword and you're just like, investors keep asking me what we're doing in the metaverse,
That's
and what we're doing
100%.
about the metaverse, and blah blah blah. So he's just like, oh fuck it, I'll spend $70 billion because Phil wants me to buy some new game studios. I'll just pretend it's a metaverse play. I don't think this has anything to do with that whatsoever.
Not at all. Not at all. I think it's 100%. This is for the shareholders so that I can justify that I'm spending $70 billion on something they don't understand.
It's like, well, remember Meta, and they're talking about, they changed their name to something related to the metaverse, and they're a big threat. Well, we're doing something too.
Imagine you're one of the powerful shareholders at Microsoft, and you're like, we just spent $7 billion buying Bethesda. We're spending 10 times that now on another publisher. Why are they so much? Metaverse. Cool?
Okay, yeah.
Got it.
Is that something to do with those NFTs? Yes, it sure is.
Sure it does. No, it doesn't. Not at all. That's fine. So we did have a couple more questions here, but we do got to wrap things up for this week. So we have a few leftovers that I'll save for next week, and we'll keep the Xbox conversation rolling on next week's show at least a little bit longer. So to everybody who did write in, thank you so much. For those of you who we didn't get to, keep it tuned for next week. Thanks again. And remember, if you want to write in to be a part of the show just like all these fine folks did, hit us up at FlipScreen.games, our website, and get links to all of the places that you can become a part of the community, interact with the show, show your support by heading over to the Patreon, all kinds of good stuff. And our brand new P.O. box.
Send us a postcard. Yeah, send us a postcard to our new P.O. box.
Please send us postcards. I want to do a mailbag episode where we just open letters from people. That would be awesome. Send us a drawing or something. That'd be cool. So come interact however you choose to, right? There's a bunch of ways to do it. We have a awesome, inclusive community of super fun and kind people that we'd love for you to come be a part of. Come chat with us. Come keep the conversation rolling. Go check out all of our other stuff. We've got the Patreon, we've got the Twitch channel, we've got YouTube, we're everywhere, right? Wherever you get your gaming content, we're there. So come hang out with us. Come be a part of what we're building here at FlipScreen Games. And thank you again for tuning in. This has been a fun one. So I imagine we'll be talking about this a couple more times between now and when it's resolved. But I've been looking forward to this conversation all week, and it did not disappoint. So I hope you enjoyed it as well, listeners. So for this week's episode of the FlipScreen Games podcast, I've been Pete. He's been Steve. And we'll see you next week. I'm going to go stream some video games.